The court said, "Please get the jurors."
The law clerk said, "Jury entering."
Jury present.
The court said, "Please be seated. USA Finkel, you may continue."
Mr. Finkel said, "Thank you, Your Honor." Okay. Welcome back. So reason number 1 that Miles Guo is guilty is he lied to his followers about investment opportunities. Reason number 2 is that those lies mattered. They were, as Judge Torres explained in her instructions, material. And that's something that you're going to have to consider when you deliberate whether the lies were material. That is whether a reasonable person would have viewed the information, Miles Guo's lies and omissions, as altering the total mix of information available. Material facts includes facts which viewed objectively affect the value of an investment opportunity, of a security, of a promise. Now, the government does not have to prove that investors. Victims actually relied on the statements that Miles Guo made. Investor intent, victim intent, is not a concern of yours. What matters for you in your deliberations is whether Miles Guo's false statements, his misrepresentation, his omissions, like saying he wouldn't spend investor money on himself, whether those show that he had intent, whether those matter to a reasonable investor. So did Guo's lies matter? Of course. Were they material? Of course. It's common sense. One way you know that they were material. One way you know that Miles Guo's lies matter is because he kept repeating them over and over and over again. But more to the point, anytime someone guarantees that you won't lose money, it is common sense that that statement, that lie, is material. Even Maggie Sklar, Miles Guo's cryptocurrency expert, agrees with that. Remember, she was a lawyer who worked at the CFTC. Are you aware, Ms. Sklar, of any crypto coin whose holders are guaranteed against any losses by a particular individual? No. But I probably want to invest in that cryptocurrency. Of course. Of course it's material if you promise you can't lose. And not surprisingly, victims agreed with Maggie Sklar. They agree with what is obviously common sense. This is Jenny Lee's testimony. She's talking about rule of law, that it mattered to her that Miles Guo was putting up his own money when deciding to donate to rule of law. This is Wei Chen. Why did she invest in GTD? Because there's no risk, she said. Minran Wu, excuse me. This is Wei Chen, asking about the risk factors that were in the private placement memorandum. Did these alter the mix for her? No. Why? Because I trusted Miles Guo. He said there were no risks, only huge returns. Minran Wu. Would you have sent money to GTD if you knew it would be used for a hedge fund investment? No. Minran Wu again. What would happen to the money, to the profits? He said many times, everyone will make money. She will make money. Miles Guo lies mattered. Jenny Lee talking about the farm loan program. Why did she send money? Because she was expecting to get GTD stock. Yoli talking about the farm loan program. Why were you collecting money? We were collecting money, and then we sent it to Miles Guo's company. And what was the purpose of doing that, to your understanding? To get shares of GTD. Le Zhou farm loans. It was important to him that the money, he understood, because he was told, would go to the working capital of the farms. Limari Reyes talked about G Club members broadly. She learned that there came a time when she became aware that G Club members, plural, expected to receive stock. And what was her understanding as to why that was? Cause Miles Guo mentioned it in a video. That's what G Club members expected according to the CO. Minran Wu, why did she send money to G Club? GTD stock. Wei Chen, why did she send money to Crane and ACHK? Why did she get a second loan on her house? For GTD shares. Minran Wu, was this 20% gold reserve important to you? The gold promise? The gold lie that Miles Guo told? Yes. Because she explained if a financial institution has an ability to buy 20% gold as the reserve, this institution's financial ability should be very good. And second, I have the impression that many banks in the world, including the Federal Reserve, they all have gold as their reserve. This sounds formal, she said. Wei Chen, did gold matter to her? It was critical, she said, because it made it sound better than Bitcoin. Lu Zhou, same thing. 20% gold adds to the value of it. Now, through this trial, you've also seen the victims be questioned by defense counsel about whether they read other materials. Some of which said things different than what Miles was said. Now, as Judge Torres instructed you yesterday, and it's important you remember this, a victim's negligence or gullibility in failing to discover a fraudulent scheme is not a defense to fraud. So whether the victim should have realized they were being defrauded or could have realized they were being defrauded is not a concern of yours. It's not something that you need to consider. That's what Judge Torres instructed. The victims are not on trial. It doesn't matter if there was some fine print disclaimer hidden purposely, by the way. But actually this fine print revealed something else. They reveal Miles Guo's intent to deceive. He knew, as we've talked about and his co-conspirators knew, that Miles Guo was spouting off lies to get other people money. So he put these documents in place to try to protect himself. This is the G Club disclaimer. Think about this for a moment. It's worth some reflection. It is literally saying, in effect, we know G Clubs knows that you've listened to Miles Guo, and what Miles Guo said mattered to you. Please don't listen to him anymore. Even though, and this is sort of hard to keep track of, but even though Miles Guo was the spokesperson for G Club. How bizarre is it to have a spokesperson who didn't get a salary by the way he just got Lamborghini and houses? We'll talk about that. How bizarre is it to have a spokesperson and then disclaim the very words of the spokesperson? The disclaimer, properly understood, is proof that Miles Guo's lies about stock mattered. Because if they didn't matter, there wouldn't need to be a disclaimer. Remember, you can't blame the victims. You cannot blame the victims for failing to review this disclaimer, or consider it, or decide that the disclaimer means that they weren't getting stock. The question for you is Miles Guo's intent to deceive, his intent to defraud. You cannot fine print your way out of criminal liability. Similar thing could be said, by the way, about the farm loan contracts. First of all, most of them weren't even signed. They were just ways to paper things, and the farms are Miles Guo's farms. It's his Himalaya Farm Alliance. He appointed the personnel. He decided who is in the Blood Iron Group. Miriam Wu's farm loan contract is a prime example. She signed it in August of 2020. When was it countersigned? November 2021 by Long Island David. And that was done because they wanted to extend the contract to add this addendum. And that happened to Lu Zhou too. And they wanted to add this addendum to give the farm additional control. To try to paper additional reasons, so they didn't have to pay up on time. It shows intent. This was part of the farm loan addendum. It said, the borrower, meaning the farm, has the right to unilaterally terminate the loan if the lender defames Guo. If the lender engages in any statements or conduct against the mission of the whistleblower movement, or engages in any conduct against the new federal state of China. Which is to say, they're just papering reasons to try to come up with ways that they think legally. Miles Guo legally can say, I don't need to pay you. It shows Miles Guo's intent. And with respect to reading the fine print, Yili Mulan told you when you invested in GTD. Did you read the documents closely? No. I don't read. I just sign where I need to sign. Why? Because I trust Miles Gua 100%. Another way you know that Miles Gua's statement mattered is that they worked. Look at the money that flowed in. Hundreds of millions of dollars floating over months, over years, because the statements. Because Miles Gua pitched them, and his statements worked. Those statements mattered for another reason too. And Wei Chen told you about this. They weren't infectious. He made those statements over and over and over again. Miss Chen, you said just a moment ago you felt like you were brainwashed. What are the things that happened to you that you think caused you to be brainwashed by Miles Gua? I think it is a messaging keeping repeating and emphasizing in your mind that make you believe it is true and make you believe it is true without any doubt. I don't know how it happened, but unfortunately it happened to me. That message is repeating. It's emphasizing. It's instilling in my mind, make me trust it every single thing, and making me acting as an idiot back then. She told you that as tears welled up in her eyes thinking about how she was deluded and tricked and brainwashed. Patrick Chen told you about something similar. My feeling right now, he said, it's like another cult, right? When you believe the leader, and you cannot ask questions. You use the phrase, wake up! What do you mean by wake up? That's how I feel because after I left the group, I feel very relieved. Miles Gua group. That's what Miles Gua did to people on purpose. He affected what they thought. His statements mattered to them. And Mulan, Yali, one of Miles Gua's closest associates. A member of the Iron Blood group, what did she learn? What did she realize after she woke up? I believe that was a very elaborate scam. Meaning Miles Gua's statements, his pitches were a scam. They were a con. They are a fraud. Wei Chen explained some more. Miles Gua lied to me and gained my trust by emphasizing and repeating over and over again that he's very honest. Trustworthy person. He never lied. He brainwashed me into believing him by telling his story that made me believe that he's very nice, kind, caring person. He lied to me to make me believe that he cares about me as his sister. He lied to me to make me believe that he's willing to share his wealth with me as his sister. He took advantage of my high hope for providing a better life for my older parents and young children by promising huge returns with zero risk. He depicted a beautiful family, a beautiful future for my family that deceived me into giving all my money. All my hard-earned money, all my hard-saved money to him to pay for his family, his daughters. His son's lavish and extravagant life. Miles Gua is a liar. He's a cheater. He's a shameless and heartless cheater and fraudster. Miss Chen is right. You know she's right. That's another way you know that Miles Gua is guilty because the lies he told mattered. They worked. His fraud worked. The third reason you know that Miles Gua is guilty is because on legal documents he thought would be in a court one day, he hid his control. He tried to protect himself from the SEC, from the Department of Justice, from the FBI, from U.S. law enforcement, and he did that. He concealed the control on legal documents because he knew what he was doing was wrong and illegal. So he tried to set up a canard to have some paper reason why all of this would be okay. To be clear, the G series, G TV, G News, G Club, G Fashion, G Coin, G Dollar, G Bank, G Mall, that stood for Gua. Not goodness and God and global. It stood for Gua. And he was in charge of all of it. But on paper, he wanted to create distance. So GTV was owned on paper by his son, by Milesun Gua through Soraka, which Milesun Gua on paper was the ultimate beneficial owner of. And on paper in the PPM. The private placement memorandum, Miles Gua, it's on the lower right of your screen, was the sponsor and advisor. He named Max Krasner, the guy who ran the slush fund for him, as an executive director, and Yvette Wong as a director. G Clubs, he had Howard he be the UBO, so he can sign money from and to himself, which is really from and to Miles Guo. Limari Reyes told you about Howard he, who was in fact Miles Guo's son's best friend. And also Miles' son, and we know this from the college recordings, also on paper like GTV, like Soraka, had ownership interest in G Club. He was technically, as he put it, a settler of the foundation. So he thought he could participate in legal conversations about it. But he was clear that actively no. The UBO is Howard he. I am just the settler. And the Himalaya Exchange which William J. allegedly owned. This contract was found in Connecticut. Government Exhibit CT 198. It was found and signed. But it's marked as the executed version, and it shows that William J. the financial guy was holding in trust the Himalaya Exchange, those companies that are listed 1 through 4 below for Miles' son or Changhua. 4 Miles Guo's son. So the Himalaya Exchange, Miles Guo tried to hide himself from that too. This is a zoom in on it. Assets were held in family members' names. This document was recovered from a search of Yvette Wong's apartment. That Lamborghini, the one found in Miles Guo's garage, was on it, along with a lot of other cars. And who hold the title to the Lamborghini? Defeng Chow, Mei Guo's fiancé, his soon-to-be son-in-law. You see next to that it says G Club International? This is Defeng Chow, Miles Guo's soon-to-be son-in-law. And this is a certificate of title for the Lamborghini with the VIN number on it that was found in Miles Guo's garage. And Defeng Chow was not an employee of G Clubs, had nothing to do with G Clubs. You heard that from Limari Reyes. This was a way to paper it to make it look like Miles Guo didn't own the Lamborghini, but he did. This is an entity issue. Also found in Yvette Wong's apartment, listing various entities, and who the paper owners of them. All the shell companies they used to hide Guo's control on legal documents. Then there's Taurus Fund. Scott Barnett. Remember him? He testified yesterday and the day before. That was Miles Guo's bodyguard. He was named as the managing member of Taurus Fund LLC. What was Taurus Fund? It was a way to hide the mall and mansion that was for the Guo family. The real estate broker who represented the Guo family, Frosini, she told you that she showed this house, this mansion to the Guo family. And Guo himself lied under oath during his depositions in connection with his bankruptcy about Golden Spring. He claimed he did not know anything about it. He lied some more about Golden Spring. He didn't know who Max Krasner was, not true. He lied about Lamp Capital, which we saw before was used to pay for his family's yachts and boats and things like that. Said he didn't know about it. He even lied about Soraka. Soraka. Remember that? We're going to come back to that. And he too lied about the G in GTV. What does it stand for? God, the goal, like GOL? The English word goal? Yeah, goal or God. Do you remember the hero video? Remember the hero video in which he appears in every single frame. A man who puts himself out in front of everything and wants to take credit and be the front of everything. Do you really think GTV is really not Guo TV? Guo Media is not Guo Media? G Fashion isn't Miles Guo? G Clubs isn't Miles Guo? It's all Miles Guo. He's lying to the bankruptcy trustee, the bankruptcy court, to hide his control on legal documents because he knows these companies are criminal. He's playing them. He's trying to hide behind the shell game. Miles Guo is not dumb. He's very smart. Look at what he put into place. Look at what he planned. Look at what he did for years. He knows. He knows. And you know too. He used the shell game so much he disobeyed a court order so flagrantly that he was held in contempt when he tried to send the Lady May the yacht abroad. And he hid his control. He hid his control by using trusted co-conspirators like Yvette and William J. that gave him some cover to try to make businesses look like independent businesses that weren't part of this criminal enterprise. And so they could put out these statements that say Miles Gwa does not have any decisive control over G Club BVI, or its parent Jovial, or its parent the Stichting. Was that true? No. And Khaled told you that. Focusing on the first sentence. Do you believe that statement to be true? No. And you know that statement is not true. And then to get some more cover, Gwa and his co-conspirators had a second layer of conspirators Howard He Mason, Long Island David, Yo Bing Zhang, Max Krasner. We've talked about that. This was a large enterprise after that all. And below them were figureheads, like Limari Reyes, the CEO of G Clubs, and Jesse Brown, the CEO of the Himalaya Exchange. And how do you know that? They told you. Ms. Reyes is the CEO of G Clubs. Did you have final decision-making authority on all matters concerning G Clubs? No. Ms. Reyes. When you were the CEO of G Clubs, did you believe that you could fire Gwa? I didn't feel like I could. And in fact, going back to the do not say words for a moment, if Miles Gwa was just the spokesperson of G Clubs, and G Clubs knew he kept saying all these things on video that were causing problems for G Clubs, so much so they gave him a list of words not to say if he was causing that much problem. If G Clubs really, if Miles were really just a spokesperson for G Clubs, they'd fire him.
Continued on next page.
Mr. Finkel said they couldn't, because Miles Gwa was G Clubs. It was his company. He controlled it. He just didn't want it to look that way on paper. Jesse Brown. As the CEO of the Himalaya Exchange, Mr. Brown. How many people reported to you? 0. What were you in control of? I was in control of nothing. It all goes back to this. Earlier on in this conspiracy, Karen Maestrello asked questions. She pushed back. Yvette told her that she was paid to execute orders, not to think. And so the enterprise worked. They found Limari Reyes. They found Jesse Brown. They found people willing not to ask questions. People who were willing to sign documents, willing to do what the enterprise wanted, to keep the money. And, of course, everyone answered to the boss, to the principal, to Gwa. And the farms? Gwa was in charge of the farms. He appointed Long Island David, brother Chong Dao, as the Secretary General of the farms. He appointed its leaders. On the right is the UK farm leader. He communicated with his most loyal farm leaders, like the Iron Blood Group, who executed his instructions, who transferred money on his behalf. And when that money went missing, he could blame it on these people, like Sarah Way and others. That was part of how this worked. And I talked about Gui used legal fine print to hide crimes. He misled his followers by brainwashing them. He built up trust. He played a long con. And amid the flurry of things, he was always careful to sometimes say, again, to try to protect himself from some legal liability, because he knew what he was doing was wrong and illegal. Remember. Wink, wink, remember, read the contract. Remember, look at the disclaimer. Look at everything. Please read the prospectus. Read the contract carefully. Please read it carefully. Look at the white papers. As I talked about, this was all intentional. It tells you that this was a setup for the victims. It tells you that Gwa, the boss, the brains behind all of this, knew what he was doing was wrong. It tells you he knew he had to try to paper over the frauds by stealing money. I just want to point to this. This is part of his bankruptcy filing. You could see from the top it was filed on the docket. And in the bankruptcy filing he was asked a question: do you have any equitable interest in any residence, building, land, or similar property? And he said no. He uses 373 Taconic. That's the Greenwich estate where the Lamborghini was parked, but he doesn't own it. And that he has access to the Sherry Netherland Hotel, the penthouse in Midtown Manhattan. But again, he doesn't own it. His son just lets him live there. But he did not mention that mansion on the lower right-hand side of your screen. And why did he not mention that mansion? Because he was hiding it from the bankruptcy trustee. That's why there are NDAs. That's why he was trying to keep it secret. He didn't want the bankruptcy trustee to get it. The CCP canard is a scapegoat. So much so that it became a joke at G Clubs. Did there come times while you were employed at G Clubs, Ms. Reyes, the CEO of G Clubs, where the cable or internet would go out? Yes. And what would the employees say? If anything, when that would happen, they would joke about it was the CCP. Because we had heard that many things were due to the CCP. Any problem, any issue. Any time someone got between him and his money, CCP. CCP. It's convenient scapegoating that he played over and over and over again. This insulation, this cover-up. They tell you that Miles Guo knew exactly what he was doing, that he wanted to paper over this fraud. And that's one more reason that you know Miles Guo is guilty. The next way you know that Miles Guo is guilty is he attacked people who went after his fraud proceeds. And by so doing, he also demonstrates his control over the G enterprise. Now you remember, perhaps, Jenny Lee, one of the victims who testified here. She introduced a recording that she had made about a dentist known, as she understood, was Himalaya Dentist. Himalaya Dentist asked Guo personally for her money back. The translation is on the right. Mr. Guo, I'm sorry. I thought it was someone else. I'm a dentist, not a spy or anything like that. How can I send them to you? She's talking about her receipts, about money that she had lost. Ah, Himalaya. This freedom fighter is now indiscernible. Please get out. Wow, please get out, the dentist responds. Is Mr. Guo asking me to get out? A male voice. Yes, please get out. Guo, now they have sent 2 lunatics to make trouble. Just ignore them. Goes on to say, Himalaya, she is crazy. That's what he does. When someone wants their money back, calls them a lunatic, says they're crazy, calls them a spy. Whatever he needs to do to go after them. Just like he went after Luke Despens, the bankruptcy trustee who was appointed by a court in Connecticut to represent creditors, and tried to make sure that Guo can't conceal his assets. That the creditors who were owed money, including a creditor who's owed money, because Miles Guo promised to pay them back and never did. Luke Despens' job was to find his assets and give them back to creditors. So Miles Guo let loose the new federal state of China on him and his family. His picture was in Guo's phone. And it's sick. Circled are Luke Despens' daughters, including Isabel Despens, Dan Copeland's wife. He told you about what it was like when he and his family were attacked and protested and harassed and targeted. Were targeted because Isabel's dad was appointed by a court to try to get creditors their money back. And this picture found in a phone in the Sherry Netherland Hotel, one of Guo's phones, proves Guo ordered this. That's how the enterprise operates. And Guo, to the fellow fighters, tried to make it fun for them. He got them not just to protest for days outside of the Despens children's home, but also outside of a school. An elementary school where Isabel Despens taught. He did this to protect his money. And Dan Copeland, who, through tears, told you about how stressful it was, how hard it was on his wife, how much she cared about her kids. Keeping them safe, making sure school is a safe environment for them to feel comfortable. And she saw how the idea that she could be causing, she blamed herself for what he did, causing trauma in some of these kids' lives. Miles Guo did that to protect his money. That's not the only time. Jenny Lee told you about a protest she went to in Hawaii that was organized by Miles Guo. Again, because someone was complaining. Yeli told you about it, that when people asked for refunds, she would ask Miles Guo whether or not to give the refunds. And Miles Guo would decide whether they publicly had criticized him or not would depend on whether they got a refund. Miles Guo told Yeli that himself, not through an intermediary. Yeli also told you about protests she watched online, where one protester punched a CCP spy. Where? In the face? Another one was punched in the eyes. What, if anything, did Guo say about these incidents? He said, "Well done." That's what Miles Guo is willing to do to protect his fraud proceeds, to protect his enterprise. And he paid these people through rule of law money, created a blacklist. He named people who got in his way. He posted their personal information online. He broadcast their login and Discord IDs. He doxed them to keep people afraid of him. When the SEC got involved, he organized protests about the SEC too. He said they were infiltrated. The SEC was infiltrated by the Chinese Communist Party, the Securities and Exchange Commission. The thing about this political activism is Miles Guo wants to have it both ways. When he is protesting and harassing people who are trying to prevent him or trying to take back fraud proceeds, then it's political activism, then it's, "I'm just a political activist." This is our First Amendment rights. But when the political activism becomes a problem, him and his co-conspirators very quickly, throw it to the side. This is an email from William J. to Ferrari. They were trying to organize some sort of promotional thing with Ferrari through the Himalaya Exchange. This was in the UK, his true home, Miles Guo's email account. And William J. says that Himalaya Exchange is a commercial entity, no political agenda. Himalaya Exchange has never made an announcement on any political stand, especially those related to China. And Miles Guo himself distanced, when it was helpful for him to do so, the G-Series and the NFSC. His political operation. This is completely a business operation. Do not think the G-Series under any circumstances. Do not link the G-Series under any circumstances to the NFSC. That is all bullshit. He plays it both ways. He say whatever he wants to say to try to get money, to try to cover it up, and to try to prevent people from doing the same. The NFSC was a tool that Miles Guo used in furtherance of his fraud enterprise to carry out his orders. It did dirty work for him. It did dirty tricks for him. And it's part and parcel of the racketeering enterprise that Miles Guo created and controlled every step of the way. Miles Guo is guilty because he lied to his followers about investment opportunities. Those lies mattered. They were material. On legal documents, he hid his control, and he attacked anyone who tried to take back fraud money. Anyone who got in his way. What's the fifth reason that Miles Guo is guilty? He laundered the fraud money. Now, I want to turn back briefly to the GTV private placement, the GTV misappropriation. There are some details in there that prove that Guo, Yvette Wang, and William J. moved money to hide its source. And its source, of course, was investor money, victim money. Now, if you recall, in the subscription documents, they said they would pay this $100 million from a JP Morgan bank account in New York. By the way, ending in 5601. And this was part of the KYC-AML process, Know Your Customer, anti-money laundering process that Heyman Capital had put in place. They were requesting all different kinds of documents. That's important. But the 5601 account was a problem for Miles Gua, Yvette, and William J.E. Because the wire information made clear that the money in it, these are bank statements, said it was from a GTV investment. So they had a problem. What if, as part of that KYC-AML process, Heyman asked for bank statements? They might. So what did Miles Gua, William J.E., and Yvette do? This shows all the statements that could get them in trouble. And, in fact, William J. even mentions that they might try to transfer from another bank account, from a different company name. And Steele Schottenheimer told him he couldn't do that. So they did something else. They laundered the money. They engaged in a financial transaction to conceal the source of the money. They moved it from the 5601 account to the 2038 account. They made this internal transfer to an account, to the 2038 account, that Yvette Wang, Yinping Wang opened that day. This transfer is June 3rd. This account, the 2038 account, was opened on June 3rd. There's no reason for this internal transfer other than to conceal where the money came from. And then after they concealed it with a financial transaction from the 5601 account to the 2038 account, they moved the $100 million into Heyman. They concealed the fraud proceeds from the GTV private placement. G Clubs was a fraud scheme, but it was also G Clubs was also a money laundering operation. All its loans and investments, they were designed to create, as we've talked about, a paper trail. And these financial transactions that they implemented from G Clubs in Puerto Rico to G Clubs in BVI, meaning the British Virgin Islands, abroad, were designed to conceal the source of the money, to make it harder for U.S. law enforcement, for the FBI to find. These are the loan agreements. This is the summary chart that Owen Foley put into evidence. He was a summary witness. There was $302 million in total in these loan agreements. This is GXZ13. $300 million. That's about, approximately, what G Clubs took in. G Clubs took the money in, they papered it with these loan agreements and investment agreements, and implemented these transactions, sent money to the BVI, sent money abroad to launder it. And where did it end up? Where did that money go? Miles Gua's garage. He also bought a Bugatti from Miles Gua. If you recall, originally, the customer name said Miles Gua, but that was a problem. That's too obvious. So they changed it to G Club International Limited, concealing Miles Gua's name for a $4.6 million Bugatti was part of it. Make no mistake about it. There was never any real effort to make these investments available for members. This was to provide benefits to the Gua family. That's what G Clubs did. There's also a yacht. Howard and he signed an agreement to send money for the yacht to the BVI, to the British Virgin Islands. A financial transaction from the U.S., out of the U.S., to conceal it. And make no mistake about it, Miles Gua was a part of this every step of the way. This is an email from Max Krasner from the office in New York to the G Club folks in Puerto Rico talking about the shipping for the vessel. For the yacht which you now know was called the Liberty. Here's a chat. This email, by the way, is September 14, 2021. Here's a chat from one of Miles Gua's phones between himself and Gladys Chow, his interpreter. What does Gladys tell him about? The boat, the yacht. Boss, this is information about the new boat Max sent you. The first shipping company, and it goes on to provide details about how to ship it ultimately to Connecticut, where he has one of his homes. He's the spokesperson allegedly, but he's involved in the shipping of a yacht? Why? You know why. Because the yacht was for Miles Gua. In fact, He helped design the font on the back of the boat. That's how in the weeds he was on this stuff. That's how immersed in the details he was. Boss, these are the fonts of the new ship. Which one do you like best? He responds, this one. G Clubs also sent a loan. A loan? Remember, none of these loans were paid back. Limari Reyes testified to that. This loan was for $10 million to Miles' son, to Miles Gua's son. What does that have to do with member benefits? Nothing. Money came in, they processed it in G Clubs, and spit it out to the Gua family. This is an email from Howard and he about that loan, or one of the loans to Miles' son Gua, in which he says they got a green light from Mr. Gua. He's in contact with Mr. Gua. And that's Mr. Gua. That Mr. Gua. Howard, he was friends with Miles' son. He didn't refer to him as Mr. Gua. We know about that because Limari Reyes, Alex H., Miles' son and Howard, he went on that boat ride together in Europe. Miles' son wasn't called Mr. Gua. They're friends. Then there's Fiesta Property Developments Limited. Howard, he tells Limari Reyes, our projects in London are doing well. There are no projects in London. Once Limari looked at a few hotels in London. There are no projects in London. We'd like to ask for the rest of the loan agreement to be transferred to Fiesta Property Developments Limited. £10 million. So they put together this loan agreement. He's referring to this loan agreement from January 2021. And what was this loan agreement for? Where did that money from G Clubs go? It went from G Clubs to a Santander bank account. This is GXZ14, in the name of Fiesta Property Development. To another account, Metro Bank, which is a bank in England, and then to Ferrari Beverly Hills. To buy this car for my son. And by the way, in the process of doing that particular transaction and others that Haitham Khalid told you about, they had to lie to a bank. This is Alex H., lying to Morgan Stanley, an FDIC-insured financial institution, saying that Fiesta Property Developments is a real estate holding company by Mr. He in the UK. That's not true. Fiesta Property Developments was a Ferrari buying company. Khalid told you. When you were working for Miles Gua and Yvette Wong, were you always truthful with banks? No. Why did you lie? To make sure that accounts got opened and stayed opened. Was that in the course of your employment? Yes. They lied to banks. They committed bank fraud. That's part of the enterprise. That's part of how it worked. I want to return to Crane for a moment, Haitham Khalid's company. Crane, as you may recall, received member payments, received G Club member payments, victim payments, and there was a dispute between Haitham Khalid and G Clubs, leading to an arbitration. You may recall that Limari Reyes told you that she wasn't truthful during that arbitration. She was towing the company line. And as a result, G Clubs won. And $46.5 million and change was awarded to Crane, to G Club from Crane. And then this letter was sent to Limari Reyes, which she didn't really know why it was sent to her. But this letter was from Aaron Mitchell, one of Gua's longtime lawyers, who helped facilitate these schemes. And it said that he was going to facilitate the transfer of 11 wire transactions. And you can look at this document. If you want, it's GC 497, totaling $46.5 million in change. Where did that money go? Went from Crane Advisory into Lawwell and Mitchell, and then Aaron Mitchell sent the $46,549,275.17 to Hamilton Opportunity Fund, William J.'s company, abroad. Then they moved it again, because they always do that, not always. But they usually do that internal transfer, to conceal it some more. Went to the Hamilton Opportunity Fund. and then was sent to McDonnell Whitaker, Inside Title Services, and Bucky SQ. What was that money for? It was for this. That's where the G Club money went, after Haitham Khaled had to send it back to G Clubs. It went to purchase this mansion in Mahwah, New Jersey. This is a chart Mr. Hinton helped create, showing the farm loan money flows. This chart is definitionally money laundering. Look at all of these transactions designed to obscure the source of where the money came from, to make it harder for U.S. law enforcement to find. That was plan. And after the money from the farms went to ACA Capital in Abu Dhabi, we know it flowed out to Lamp Capital, to Greenwich Land, to Hudson Diamond, to Lexington Properties, to William J. himself. Those other entities, Lexington, Hudson, Lamp, Greenwich, those are Miles Gua's family funds, what he used for his life, for his food, for his clothes, for his boats, for his cars. It was a slush fund. That's the fifth reason you know that Miles Gua is guilty. Because he laundered the fraud proceeds to cover it up. The sixth reason that Miles Gua is guilty is that he had a motive. First of all, money is always a motive. People are motivated by money. Some people are willing to commit crimes to get money, like Miles Gua. But the money mattered to Miles Gua in particular because of what happened in Hong Kong. On October 23, 2018, a court in Hong Kong entered an order seizing and restraining Gua's assets in Hong Kong and elsewhere. So yes, the CCP seized Miles Gua's money. Obviously they took it. He no longer had the ability to project that he was a billionaire. And what happened in November of 2018? He started asking for money. Rule of law. Now moved to GTV. And what happened with GTV? The SEC got involved and took a lot of the money. There's the freezing order, leads to the rule of law launch. Then, there's the private placement launch. Then, there's the SEC getting involved, putting a stop to the GTV private placement. So what happens? Farm loan program gets launched. Then G Clubs. Another way to conceal sales of stock. That's the settlement, where Soraka, GTV, and VOG had to pay more money. What happens after that? The Himalaya exchange launches. If you remember, Jesse Brown told you that the reason the Himalaya exchange launched when it did is because Miles Gua was putting pressure to launch it. Then, in September and October of 2022, the U.S. government seized about $640 million from the G enterprise. What happened after that? A 15 and A10 and Abu Dhabi G Clubs. In other words, trying to create fraud enterprises, sub-companies in foreign countries, outside the reach of U.S. law enforcement. This timeline shows the schemes. They show that Miles Gua was adapting and moving and evolving his operations, trying to literally outfox U.S. law enforcement and the Securities and Exchange Commission. One other point to make on this. There's been suggestion throughout this trial that Miles Gua is very rich and he has other money abroad. His family has money, other people have money for him. Maybe, but rich people commit crimes too. And whether Miles Gua was rich or poor doesn't really matter. What matters is what he did, lied to people to take their money. The seventh reason that Miles Gua is guilty is he and his family benefited from his crimes. The proceeds of the fraud flowed to Miles Gua and his family. It shows why he did all this. This is Mahwah. This is Miles Gua's house. He tried to make it a home. He lived in it. His real estate broker told you the buyers were the Gua family. He kept his medicine there. His New York State license, his passport, his identity card, pictures of his family, some more pictures of his family. His wife's Lego collection, his Brioni suits with his name in them, some more pictures of his family, $394,000 in cash. And there was also a document found inside about setting up electricity and lighting boxes in May's closet, his daughter's closet, in her fiancé's room, Wayne Deffing Chow, and in his main bath and shower. Boss's main bath and shower, and Madam's, his wife, Mrs. Gua. He even moved some of his stuff from Taconic Road, 373 Taconic Road, to the Mala Mansion in New Jersey. And, of course, you saw these documents between Palazzosi and Promemoria, a designer of some sort, and Gladys Chow. This is one example, Pro 466. But there are many other examples in the Pro series of exhibits. Gladys says, "It's been almost a year since we last talked. Please allow me to introduce myself. I'm Gladys, the assistant of Mr. Miles Kwok." And she gives him links about design plans. Sent him a walk-in closet for the missus, a closet for the daughter, a closet for the son, a closet for the Mr. Kwok. And, of course, Miles Gua texted with Gladys Chow about designing the Mala Mansion.
Video played.
Mr. Finkel said, translated, he is saying, "Don't put the head of the bed on the third floor toward the back. Put it towards here. Most of the bathroom facilities are placed here, which is Guamay's bedroom, his daughter's bedroom. This is Guamay's master bedroom, Guamay's big bathroom here. And this is Xiao Chow, Deffing Chow's room, a small suite. There are 2 bedrooms for them, and a public living room between the 2 of them for them to share." This text chain is important too. This is a text chain between Gladys Chow and Miles Gua. She texts him a picture of this table and says, "Boss, this table you asked your comrade to help order is already ready and will be shipped from Shenzhen, China. Where do you want to ship it?" Then she goes on to ask, "Is this table intended for a company, that company? Let me see that the company should be responsible for the expense." And what does Miles Gua say in response? Use G Club or another private company for payment. Don't involve anything else. Either G Club or another private company. This is yet another example, on top of all the examples of the Khalid recordings, which are the GX400 series, of Miles Gua directing the use of G Club money for a table. He's not the spokesperson. He's not just the spokesperson. He controls the money. Talked about this a moment ago. Then there's Buck ESQ LLC, the attorney trust account. And Amy Buck testified. She told you about how she would get direction from Gladys Chow and sometimes Scott Barnett, some other people, about things to buy for this family she thought was really rich for the Mala property. This is her testimony. She talks about the things she would buy with, just to be clear, the money in her trust account which came from the Crane money, which is to say G Club money, member money, victim money. She bought for $1.1 million a tortoiseshell jewelry box and some candlesticks. She bought a chandelier for $120,000 under the direction of Miles Gua's agents. She spent $6,000 on some other candelabras under the direction of Miles Gua's agents. A $53,000 bronze, I don't know how to pronounce that, but there was a pair of them. A $19,000, that was on sale, handsome and complete set of 4 19th century walnut benches, a coffee table for $40,000, less the $16,000 discount, mattresses for $36,000 apiece, an antique rug for $250,000, another set of rugs for $300,000, mirrors and some other stuff for $97,000. For large antique French Louis XVI gilt bronze and glass arm lantern chandeliers for $1 million. Additional items for $428,000. Sound equipment for $104,000. None of these things were for the G Club members. This was how Miles Gua wanted to turn the house he bought in Mahwah, New Jersey into his family home. And he used victim money to do it, to benefit himself and his family. And as we talked about, he got a car. His son would have gotten the Bugatti, except for the fact that the FBI got involved. Seized it. And Miles' son got a Ferrari, as we talked about. A Ferrari for him. His helmet says, "Miles' son. This is not for G clubs. This is not for members. This is not to fight the CCP. This is a benefit that shows Gua's family benefited from his crimes. From the Himalaya exchange. Miles Gua got a $37 million loan when he needed it the most. When he thought that he'd be held in contempt. Can go to jail. And the farms paid for personal expenses. And the GTD private placement paid for a hedge fund investment, as we talked about. And that was in the name of Soraka, which itself was a slush fund. You saw some of those documents. Stefano Ricci clothing for $8,000. A home inspection in New England at Taconic Road was paid for with Soraka Media Group money. That was for Miles Gua's home in Connecticut. And there's a chat on the side, which makes clear that Max was implementing orders from Miles Gua to use the family slush fund. Soraka. That was the name the Heyman investment was in, the family slush fund. And Miles Gua knew his victims lost money.
Video played.
Mr. Finkel said, that's November 11, 2020, where he tells his followers not to worry. No one lost money as a result of the Soraka investment. Do you know how much money you lost by shorting the Hong Kong dollar, brothers and sisters? All Kyle-based funds loss. 50% loss. You did not lose. Fellow comrades, Soraka you did not invest, Soraka invested. So he knew about the Soraka investment. Of course he knew. And he reemphasizes again, I can't use the money you invest to buy even a Japanese meal. If he does, I will be arrested directly. The United States will really arrest you. He knows using fraud money, victim money, is a crime. He always knew that. And he did it for years. And that money, as we talked about, 30 million of it, $30 million, a lot of money gone. Never paid back. So this is what Miles Gua got. $1.3 billion comes in. Approximately 100 million goes to his family offices and his family members. 550 million goes to William J.E.'s companies to be laundered and processed. It's a lot of money. A lot of money from his victims for himself. That's what Miles Gua got. What did his victims get? Less than nothing. They lost. Minran Wu, she lost $15,000 just from this investment. More overall. Lu Zhou, $30,000. A lot of money, $30,000. Jenny Lee. $60,000 from the farm loans itself. A lot of money. Wei Chen, $1.1 million. She invested in the private placement in G Club. The digital bank, another scheme. Don't have time for all the schemes. Himalaya exchange, the rule of law, H-Coin. She lost $1.1 million. And these people, these victims, they not only lost their money, you heard testimony about this, they lost credit by taking out loans to pay for these investments. They lost time with their children and their families, and their work by volunteering for Miles Gua. By trying to help him because they thought it was a good thing to do, thinking about him all the time. Putting their trust in him. And he took it from them. He took that trust and used it to buy a boat and a car and a huge house. Everyone agrees. Government agrees. Defense agrees that Miles Gua was targeted by the CCP. But as Miles Gua's expert told you, none of that matters for this trial. And it doesn't give him a license to rob from these people. Common sense tells you that. Their expert, Gua's expert, told you that. But there is targeting in this case that does matter. You know what targeting matters in this case? The targeting Miles Guo did. His targeting of victim money, that's the targeting. His targeting of victims that matters in this trial. Miles Guo claimed to be a political activist. And he sucked people in. He brainwashed some of them. He convinced them he could help them, that he was trustworthy. He attracted people like a magnet, people who agreed with his message. He called them his fellow fighters, his comrades, his brothers in arms, his sisters in arms, his friends, his family. He brought them in close. He said he loved them. He cared about them. He built up this trust. And they gave their money to him. He took it. And what did he do when these people put their faith in him? He conned them. He scammed them. He defrauded them. He targeted these people, thousands of people, the victims. He knew what he was doing, and he did it for years. Over and over and over again. It wasn't a mistake. It wasn't an accident. It was intentional. It was his design. He targeted the victims. He targeted thousands of victims. He lied to take other people's money. That's the targeting that matters in this trial. So there are many reasons, many, and Miles Guo is guilty of each and every charge. And we went through 7. And any one of these is enough to convict Miles Guo. He lied to his followers about investment opportunities. Those lies mattered. They were material. On legal documents, Guo hid his control. He attacked anyone who tried to take back the fraud proceeds. He laundered the fraud proceeds. He had a motive. He, Miles Guo, and the Guo family benefited from his crimes. Any one of these is enough to convict Miles Guo of each and every charge. And you should convict him because he's guilty. Because he's guilty beyond a reasonable doubt. I'm going to make 2 last points, and then I'm going to sit down. First, as I think you already know, and as Judge Torres instructed you, this case was lawfully brought by the United States government by career prosecutors and career FBI agents whose job it is to enforce the laws of this country. This is not China. This is New York City. We're in downtown Manhattan in a federal courthouse, where judges like Judge Torres make sure everyone who wants their day in court is entitled to it. Everyone who wants to hold the government to its burden of proof is entitled to it. And we've met our burden here and then some. Do you know what else we have in the United States? We have you. We have a jury, average citizens doing their civic duty, taking away time from their lives, from their jobs. Your jobs, from your friends and family, to make sure that everyone who wants it is entitled to their day in court. I'm not a CCP spy, neither is Judge Torres, neither are you. So decide this case based on the evidence you have seen and heard these past 7 weeks. The evidence that is overwhelming. All of the testimony, all of it. The direct, the cross, the defense case, the government's case, all of it shows beyond a reasonable doubt that Miles Guo committed wire fraud, securities fraud, laundered money, lied to banks, and agreed with others to erect a racketeering conspiracy, a fraud enterprise. That is what Miles Guo did. That is what he chose to do. That's what the evidence shows. That's what the government has proved beyond a reasonable doubt. I'm going to end where we began when this trial began, back on May 24th. The first witness, Special Agent Erin McNamara. She's a special agent from Connecticut. She took the stand, first time. She told you about the search of this place, was Greenwich Estate. On March 15th, 2023, there was still snow on the ground. She told you about the garage. Lamborghini in the garage. She took you inside to an office. Inside that office was some production equipment. Microphone, cameras, a flag that at the time you didn't know what it meant. A star at the time you couldn't have known what it meant. But you know now. And at the time you first saw this image, you didn't appreciate. I'm sure, because the evidence wasn't in like it is now, that this is not just a desk and a microphone. This is a crime scene. This is where Miles Gua, one of the places, he sat and lied to people to take their money. And Gua is responsible for doing that, for the harm he caused, for doing it on purpose, intentionally, knowingly. Gua is responsible. Just like everyone, all of us, are responsible for your choices, for our choices. He's responsible for his. He's responsible for his actions. He's responsible for his decisions. Gua is responsible for all of this. He chose to lie. He chose to defraud. He chose to take what was not his. He chose to work with others to make it all happen, to build an empire of fraud. The evidence of all that is overwhelming. It is clear. It is plain. Gua's schemes were sprawling. They were vast. But they collapsed to a simple, inescapable, and obvious truth. Miles Gua lied to take other people's money. And the evidence in this case, all of it, leads to one verdict, just one, and you know it. You know what that verdict is. The defendant, Gua Wigui, Ho Wan Kwok, Brothers 7, the principal, boss Miles Gua. This man, on each and every count, Miles Gua is guilty. Thank you.
The court said, "Members of the jury, we've heard the government's summation, but we're still not finished with the trial. We have other phases, and so it's not yet time for you to start deliberating. So we're going to take our half-hour lunch. We'll come back at 2:30. Remember that you're not allowed to discuss the case amongst yourselves. Don't permit others to discuss the case in your presence. Don't read, listen to, or watch anything from any source that touches on the subject matter of this trial."
Jury not present.
The court said, "Counsel, please step up."
Continued on next page. At sidebar.
The court said, "Mr. Ferguson, I just wanted to ask about your wife."
Mr. Ferguson said, "Everyone is doing very well. Thank you, Your Honor."
The court said, "Wonderful. Was it a girl or a boy?"
Mr. Ferguson said, "A girl."
The court said, "Oh, great. Well, I'm happy for you."
Mr. Ferguson said, "Thank you."
The court said, "All righty. That's it."
Luncheon recess.